And we're live. Welcome back to Studio Jakarta EE. And this time I'm here with Arjan Tijms, and we're going to have a chat about whatever we come up with, right?
Right.
So let's just introduce yourself.
Okay, so my name is Arjan Tijms. I'm from the Netherlands. I worked a long time with Jakarta EE, starting in 2000 for a large affiliate company network that had a Java EE application. And then at some point I founded the Omnifaces project, and I got into the specs in JSF first, then into security. I worked a couple of years for Piranha, and now I'm working for myself. And that's essentially, in very short, my story.
Yeah, and you've been involved in not all, but very closely all the specifications of Jakarta EE.
Yeah, that's right. So I joined a lot of specs, and I've always seen Java EE and now Jakarta EE as an more like an entire self-contained platform. So some people tend to look more at the individual specs. It's big with servlet, like there's an entire community who only use the servlet essentially and nothing else. But for me, it has always been about the entire platform.
Yeah.
So that's why I joined all the specs.
Yeah, so today we're celebrating Jakarta EE9, and the big thing there is obviously the namespace change. And what's your take on the namespace change, Jakarta EE9? Was it a good decision to go with the Big Bang approach, or any thoughts?
Yeah, so the Big Bang approach was absolutely my favorite choice. It would have dragged along for a long time if we didn't do it this way. It did took a lot of time, of course. So we spent nearly 2 years, I think, on the entire transition, which is essentially much longer than we thought before when the spec was just transferred. Some people are already talking about, okay, now we can do all those great new things, and we can design the world, and then we still have to do the Jakarta EE 8 release with the changed spec process. Then we had to do the namespace change and update all the components, and this took quite a bit of time. But yeah, I'm happy that it's finally done.
Yeah, and one of the things we did, that was actually for Jakarta EE8, and we just talked about it, that we changed how we call things. Like JaxRS isn't called JaxRS anymore, it's Jakarta RESTful Web Services. And this morning we saw an important examples of why it's important to say things like this, because on the mailing list somebody mentioned EL3, and what could that mean? What's the ambiguity there?
Yeah, so I immediately thought about expression language, since that's most often abbreviated to EL, and even the version number matched EL 3.0. So I was thinking this other person was talking about that, and then after some confused emails, it appeared he was talking about Eclipse Link.
Yeah.
And at some point it just hits me, like A for Eclipse, L for Link. Oh my gosh, it's Eclipse Link. So this confusion about all these 3-letter and 2-letter abbreviations, in my opinion, has hurted Java EE in the past, since a lot of people new to the technology were so confused about all those things, JTA, JCA, JSP, JSF, what have you. And some other technologies were just talking about, for example, say Spring Security. Or Spring MVC. And this was so much more clear to people. That I think it was at Java Land 2 years ago when we two talked about this.
Yeah.
We said it might be better to go for just simple names. Don't have all those filler things like Jakarta Persistence Architecture, or Java messaging service, concurrency, utils, like all those extra words like architecture, API, service, utils. I mean, what does it really add to the specs, to the API? So we decided to remove all those words.
Yeah, so names matter. And you mentioned you're now on your with your own company, and you're developing a new player on the market.
Yeah, that's right. So this player is now developed in my own time. So I'm doing consultancy, and then in my free time with some other people, I'm developing Piranha.
And you should use the opportunity to say the name, so this is marketing,
It's called Piranha Cloud. And it's a new full Jakarta platform runtime. And what makes it different to the existing servers is that for Piranha, we try to not focus so much on the application server bits. So in the past, Java EE, Jakarta EE now has been quite entangled with this application server concept, where you have an installed application server, you deploy your applications to it, you deploy multiple applications to it, you undeploy them. There's a management console where you monitor and set things. This, of course, has its own value, but we discovered this gap in the market where there's a demand for essentially just a runtime. So just a minimal amount of server bits to get all the components working together, and also allows you to build up this server, this minimal server, quite programmatically, and without necessarily having a deployment, having an HTTP server even, so you can just shoot your programmatic requests into them. And that's, I think, quite a distinguishing feature.
Yeah. So one of the kind of goals of Jakarta EE9 is to lower the entry barrier. And would you say, with the work on Piranha and the way you've done this, that we've succeeded with lowering the barriers?
Yeah, so for the large part, indeed. So there's still some things which are, from the technical perspective, in the full platform, perhaps difficult to implement, like the application client container is still there. Some remote EGB things are still there. They're mandatory for the full platform. On the other hand, there's a lot of simplification in EGB, like the EGB to that X group API group is optional now. The Corba, the interoperability there is optional. So we might even give the full profile a go, but the first aim would be for the web profile still. So that we can just have a simpler version of EGB Lite, have the minimal amount of APIs that are easiest to pass the TCK for, and so that's essentially our first goal.
Yeah. So that's interesting, because in the last couple of years we haven't seen that many new implementations of Java EE and Jakarta EE. So it's pretty cool that we have a new one now coming up, and having a little different view on it as well. So
yeah, so in our default configurations that we have, it's Nano Embedded, Micro, and Server. Server is most similar to the existing application servers. It's like the server as an HTTP stack running, has a deployment feature, so that's most similar to those existing things. Then with Micro, it's essentially the thing that runs a single var, so that's known from some other application servers as well. But then with Nano, things get more interesting, since that's essentially the platform but without an HTTP server, without a deployment feature. So that can essentially be used as like a unit test framework, or it can be used in Azure functions. It's really lightweight, but it still has the full and the real Jakarta EE components.
Yeah, so this is super interesting, and especially when you mention functions, and we could talk for hours about this, but I'm sorry, but our time is actually up.
Yeah, we didn't have that much time.
Yeah, we were cut a little short, but there is one question here, and it's actually not about Piranha, it's about your former employer, Piranha, and they're asking, is Piranha going to push changes back to Glassfish, or who will support Glassfish? And I guess the answer to the last question, it's the community, because Glassfish is now open source.
Indeed.
And as I understand it, the Piranha source base has diverged so much from Glassfish that it's not very easy to push back.
Yeah, so it's legally not even possible to directly push back, since Piranha is forked off the Glassfish base, Glassfish 4, before it was contributed to Eclipse.
Yeah, so it's license issues as well, yeah.
Yeah, so you can't just do a big PR of Piranha directly to Glassfish and be done with it. You would have to extract all those tiny changes everywhere, then merge them into Glassfish, resolve all the changes that have occurred in two places. That's really difficult to do. It's more easy for them to contribute back the changes they make to the components that make up Glassfish, like Grizzly, HK2, and PR is indeed doing that. So, of course, not longer working for them, I can't speak for them. It's their decision, but they actually do push back changes to HK2, to Grizzly, what have you, back to the upstream repositories.
Well, thank you very much for joining me here, and
thank you for having me.
Good to see you again later, and we can continue this chat on the Jakarta EE Studio YouTube channel. So
all right.
So thank you very much, and I think we're getting pulled over to the next session.
All right, thank you. Cheers.